Hey everybody, in today's video tutorial we're going to be painting a simple little landscape using budget art supplies. I've got this upcycled canvas. This is a canvas board. It's not even square, it's all crooked. All I did was apply a whole bunch of layers of white paint to cover up the previous painting. I've got some brushes that I picked up at the dollar store. I have a little container here. You can check out the video that I did before. It's creating basically you're creating your art toolbox for $18.25 Canadian. That's what I've got here. So I've got some brushes, so flats, some bristles around. Use what you have. And I've got a palette knife, which I probably will not use, so I'm going to put it aside. The paint is the DecoArt Crafters acrylic paint that I also picked up at the dollar store. This all started off with a project, a rock painting project that I was hosting for a bunch of kids. And Joe goes, look, DecoArt's got paint here. So what I've got is Christmas green, peacock blue, lavender, Christmas red, bright yellow, black, and white. And the black, I'm not sure if I'm going to end up using it. I'm going to be doing an experiment. You guys know that I mix up my own black to call it chromatic black. But the brown, which is actually cinnamon brown, is a bit transparent. That's the compromise that you make when you're using craft paint, is that there's a little bit more filler in there than pigment. A lot of times they add white to try to make it more opaque. And what do you expect for $1? Well, for this is $1.50 Canadian, and it works. The paint is actually probably one of the best craft paints I've ever used, because it's not soupy, and that's the one thing I hated way back when I was learning painting, is that the stuff that I found at Michael's, and that was really soupy. So I've got the paints laid out here, and with a DIY wet palette, folded paper towels that's wet. I've got a video on that as well. So what I thought we would do is, because we're going into a new season here, is to create a bright sky. Like, this is going to be almost like a fantasy painting, because I'm painting from memory. I'm not painting from a photograph or anything. I'm thinking Aurora Borealis, I'm thinking something like that, with some dark pine trees in the front, and just to create something really simple and pretty. And I need a haircut. Oh my god. Paper towels, of course. And for the palette, I'm just using a gray palette. Use freezer paper or a sheet of glass. That's fine. I can't use glass because of the shine. Oh, and for the record, this is my very first painting using dollar store brushes, and even the craft paint, so this will be interesting. So I'm just going to wet the canvas, because it'll help the paint flow a little bit better. Normally I would say use a slow dry medium, or even the DecoArt Traditions extender. Nope, this painting is using, it's a Thrifty painting. Take a paper towel and just dab. Now obviously if you're painting on paper you can't do this unless you painted it with white paint first. And I'm going to create a dark blue. So I'm going to do this right on the canvas. Yeah, I want it darker than that. So I'm going to take a little bit of black, a little bit more blue. And the reason why I'm mixing right on here is, well, if we're being thrifty, we don't want to waste the paint on the palette. So this is going to be dark anyways. And this will likely take 2 coats of paint. And as or you just make it thicker, as we're painting, we're going upwards, the paint is going to become a little bit more blue and a little bit more light. So now I'm going to put this right here in less black. So it's a little bit more blue. And oh, silly me, I forgot to put white paint down on the palette. Now the one nice thing when you're working with paint thick like this is that it does take a little bit longer to dry. You can see up here I'm already having trouble putting the paint on there. And that, because the water evaporated. Ooh, too much black. What do I do? Well, just add a little bit more blue, a little bit more white. Let's put a bit more white in there. A bit more blue. So I really like this night sky color. And you can leave it rough like this if you want. I'm just going to smooth things out a bit because there's more color going on top of that. So I'm just using wide X strokes. The X strokes is like this, but just wide. And I'm not looking, I gotta sit on a corner here. So I'm looking for an airbrushed effect, but I'm looking for something a little bit more blended. Down here, I can just go straight across because this is gonna be foliage anyways. That's actually not too bad. But as it's drying, I can see where there's some areas that need a bit more coverage. Oops, I got some lavender in there. Now, ideally what you want to do is you want to let this dry first before adding any more paint because the paint might lift up. So I'm going to take the heat gun to this and I'm going to dry it and then you'll be able to see because all I see from this angle is shine. If you don't have a heat gun, use a hair blower. If you don't have a hair blower, I'm in awe because I couldn't imagine my life without a hair blower, but just let it air dry. And it shouldn't take more than 10-15 minutes, but make sure it's dry before you apply your next coat of paint. Now a tip, when you're painting with acrylics, regardless of the quality, one thing to keep in mind, that the paints will always dry different than what they look like when they're wet. Okay, remember that. So we look down here, super matte finish, and this would actually make for a nice underwater scene. So we're gonna go back over, and now I am gonna use the palette because I don't need to put paint everywhere. So I'm going to make that blue-black again, and you can see that I am having to use a lot more paint with this, and that's one thing when you're using craft acrylic paint is that's the compromise. So let's go down here, and this has to be opaque. Down here, and put a bit more black in there. This is going to be some foliage, and all we're going to be doing here is just overlaying some shapes. And I'm going to take a little bit more white, a little bit more blue. Let's see what color we have here. All I see is shine. Now I did not wet the canvas first. I'm applying this dry, wet on dry. Now one thing that you're learning here is values. So taking your paint and either adding black or adding white to change the value of it. And by adding the black, all I'm really doing is making it more of almost like a denim gray. Well, depending on where you buy your jeans. And I would say, let's see if I can use up the rest of that blue. And don't forget, as you go further down, it is going to be darker. I need some more blue. See, if I would have been using the premium acrylics or the, whoops, wrong pack placed. The premium acrylics, the traditions, or the fluid acrylics, I would have had plenty of paint on here. But that's the compromise. And you need to be okay with that. Now, depending on the brand that you're using, you may have to put more paint on the canvas. Okay, I'm liking that blue in here. Just going into touches of white just to create a little bit of interest in there. I am liking that. Now remember, what it looks like now is not what it's going to look like when it dries. So let's dry it again. One tip to check when you want to know if your canvas is dry, it may feel dry to the touch, but depending on how much paint you put on there, the underlying layer could be a little bit wet. If you touch your canvas, okay, it should feel like it's room temperature. If it's cold, the paint hasn't dried yet. And obviously if you just use a heat gun, and if it's hot, you gotta wait a little bit for it to cool off. So you can tell that it's got a nice finish to it. I love it. You can see right here a bit of the shine. That's not quite dry yet. I love the matte finish of this. Okay, so I'm going to take some green, a little bit of white, and then I'm going to start off like this. Then I'm going to go into the next color. I'm going to take a little bit of the blue, a little bit of the white. You can see it's the same. And as I'm making the stroke, it's the same thing as my airplane stroke when drawing. Touch, push, lift. So I'm not going like this. I'm coming the brushes up, coming down, making contact with the canvas, and lifting off. And that's where I get those nice wispy lines. You can see here I didn't quite lift off enough. I'll just spread that out a little bit. Then go into the next color. I'm going to rinse my brush. And I'm doing these colors in this order because that way they won't make each other muddy. So on the color wheel, naturally, green, blue, lavender, red, and yellow, they're all next to each other, the color wheel. Green is in blue, blue is in lavender, red is in lavender, and then between red and yellow makes orange, so they're all together. And here I put a little bit too much paint in there. That's okay. We have to still do another step to this. And you can make this left-right if you want. Doesn't matter. Then a little bit of red. Didn't clean the brush. There's going to be a whole bunch of foliage here. I'm going to go into the yellow. A little bit of white. And the white really is just to make it a little bit more opaque. Now when I'm putting the yellow on here, it's turning to a little bit of, it's turning a little green, turning a little bit of green, turning a little green. And then I'm going to take a little bit more of that green, a bit of the white, and just put that in here. So I can come in now, looking here, and there's going to be some trees. So I think I want to brighten this up just a little bit more. I'm going to take a little bit more lavender, a little bit more white. A bit more white than that. Just want to put a little bit more white right in the middle. And although the Aurora Borealis, the pictures that I've seen, is more the greens and blues, I like this brightness of color. You can do this any way you want. I'm going to take a bit more of the blue. See, as it dries, it's drying darker. And I'll take a little bit more of that green. Overlap the blue. Take a speck more white. And I want it just a little bit brighter with the white. A little bit lighter. Trying to do this wet on wet. Now, if you have trouble with your bristle brush, your synthetic brushes to do this, go with a bristle brush. You'll be able to get a lot of good drag on that. Putting a little bit more white. So now what I want to focus on, a little bit more drag. I'm going to turn this, focus more on the top. And I want to overlap the colors a bit. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue, a little bit of lavender. And then you can just go in between the colors. I'm going to take that stained blue. And it'll look different depending on what kind of paint you're using. So just keep that in mind as well. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Crud. I wanted to put some stars in here. Oh, shoot. Did I just put paint all over my face? I've got these two little bristle brushes here. One's a flat, one's a round. Oh, darn. I wanted to do the stars on the bottom. So just going to lift up. Ooh, the bristles are coming out. That's what you gotta understand when you're using craft paint. And the craft brushes, I should say. A little bit more water. Toothbrushes apparently are really good for this. So now we have to work on the foliage. So I'm going to take the heat gun and just quickly dry this. Okay, so now we're going to work on the trees. Now the trees, I'm going to put, heat gun's hot, ow. If you want to sketch it out with a pencil first, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use a white pencil, little composition wise. putting your piece into thirds, my sweet spot is right here. So I'm going to put my feature tree right here. And then I'll put a taller one here. So into thirds, third. So I'm thinking my foliage is going to be right there. And I'm going to put a little tree here. A much taller one here. Let's make this one a bit taller. That one a bit shorter. And make this one a little bit taller. Yeah. We'll try and see how that works. Okay. One tip that you can do if you're not sure is you can basically draw the outline of what you want for your tree, and that will help you so you don't make triangle trees. So let me go over here. So if I just make some lines, it's like almost like you've had too much coffee. So you're going to use these as a guide, and this you need to obviously do black. But this gives you a little bit of a help, and I do have one of my courses on negative space with when you're working with trees. I'm going to, let's see, we're going to work with, I normally would do this with a flat brush, but this bristle brush is really, that's really, really, really rough. What else can I use? Let's try this one. You may be tempted to go with a liner brush or a bristle brush, but don't forget tree trunks aren't perfectly straight and perfectly smooth. They do have branches and nibby knobs, that's a new word. Nibby knobs sticking out. So I like using a bristle brush for that, but this one is really rough. So we'll see what happens. You can use black. What I'm going to do is I want to take a green and then tint it with a little bit of black. A bit more black. I want it to be almost black. This is where I would have used the chromatic black to make a type of burnt umber. Let's see what can happen. You're starting off with a thicker trunk and working up, and it can be crooked. It's not bad. Now I can't see because of the glare. Actually, that's pretty good. Yeah, this brush is challenging. Holy moly. Okay, I'm going to have to go to a different brush because that one's just too large. Now you'll see what happens when we use a synthetic brush. That it's much more perfect. And I don't know about you, but I don't want my trees to be perfect. So I'm going to turn it onto the corner. So I'll start off with this one here. And then I'll go to the bristle one for the bottom. Ideally what you want is you want your mixture to be darker than the background. Not bad for dollar store brushes. But I am finding myself, oh, just go use the other brushes. Just go use the other brushes. So with the bristle, this is going to be the challenging part now, is where you want to start creating your leaves or your branches. And just push up. Make some on the left, some on the right, some a bit curved, some facing upwards. What you don't want to do, you don't want to do this. Unless that's the style of painting you're going for. And if you're using a fan brush, some of you may be painting your trees like that. Actually, that's not bad. You know that? I've never used this. This is the first time using this brush, so now I'm thinking, just make sure that there's a lot of air going around your pieces. That's actually darker. That's actually a pretty good tree. But you see the point I'm making is that you don't want to Don't make your trees perfect. Oh, the phone. Joe will have to get that one. So I ran out of paint, so I'm just going to a little bit more there. And don't forget the foliage also goes in front of the trees. Let me try with the round brush. Ooh, look at that. That's bristles coming out everywhere. And the brush is falling apart, the glue. Well, dollar store brushes, so you gotta be okay with that. That's not working for me. No, that's not working for me. That's going in the water. Oh, let's just continue using this one. Use the corner. Let me get the flat brush for that one. Little flat brush. I keep forgetting to show you guys this. Just to show you what the true underlying color is. So there's the green. It's a green gray. So just touch the corner, turn the brush a little bit. Leave a space, put a clump. Don't forget some branches go up, some of them fade down. I am having to use a lot of paint for this. Oh, I like that. Let's put a little bit here. Now, one thing I'm also noticing, being so close to this, the camera's this way. I'm over here. When you're painting a landscape, what you typically want to do is have the canvas right in front of you. So you're looking at it this way. So it took me 1, 2, 3, 4. It took me 4 trees to figure out the groove with the brush. Now this is just these brushes. There were a lot of other brushes that I could have used as well. I could have picked up, and this is just one dollar store I went to. So I already know that there's a ton of them out there. Also know Curry's, the art store that I go to, they have a lot of economy brushes. So I can tell a huge difference between my very first tree to my last tree. And as they're getting better as I went this way, because I was starting to get the groove. I've never used this brush before. So if you're using, don't do what I just did right now. Do it on scrap paper, do it in art journal to practice, to get the feel for the brush. I now know exactly how much paint I have to load in this, then go to the canvas. But you know what? I'm not editing out my mistakes, and I'm not going to start over from a new canvas. I'm going to show you exactly the process here. And by to fix up some of the trees, is I'm just going to just tap a little bit. Not going to fill in the spots, but I'm just going to add a little bit more of a little bit of like from the corner. And I just took some of the green, that same mixture, and I added a little bit of yellow to it, because the trees at the top will be a little bit brighter than trees in the bottom, because that's where the moon is and all that stuff. This one I am going to go to the smaller brush to see what we can get. Not too much. We're not making yellow snow. So now I'm going to have to go through this whole process again with this brush. But that's actually pretty good. And actually I could take some of that background color and put the highlight with that, but then the trees will just go right in. And this one here, I'm thinking I probably shouldn't have put so much green, but that's okay. And now this last part, super, super easy. And I'm going to use that same brush I used for the trees. This has to be really, really dark. So black and blue typically. It's foliage. I could take some black, get some blue in there. Let's get some of this green. It needs to be more on the black side. A bit more black. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. Scrub, scrub. And I'm going to use the texture of the paint to create some of the, I'm going to use the texture of the paint to create some of the texture. I'm going to use the paint, the thickness of the paint, and the brush strokes to create some of the texture. And at the top, I'm just going to push that paint up there. I would never do this with my expensive Supreme brushes and my Majestics and all that stuff. And even my Sable Tex, no way it'll ruin the brushes. These are the, these are just dollar store brushes, so no biggie. And then what I can do is then just take more black and just come in the wet paint and just add little bits on top, because the black will make this darker and you'll get some natural foliage going on. You can draw a moon in there. I suck at putting a moon in with like a perfect circle. I'm leaving this on a good note. So I'm going to dry this, and then we come back, you'll be able to see what it looks like. There you go. So it's all finished. Now you can tell here, see that's the paint is really thick. I'm going to let that air dry. And you may be wondering why I left so much room around the edges. The canvas, if you look at it, it's not square. So hopefully if I get it to fit inside a frame, I'm just going to use this for demonstration purposes, but if I had to frame this, I may actually have to cut it. So I'll use a blade and cut it down. So that's why I left quite a bit of room, especially on the bottom. So when cutting it, if you look here, how unsquare it is. Come on. So that's how off it is right there. About 3 millimeters where it's not square. So cutting it down, I'll likely cut it right there. So that way the focus will be more up here. There'll be more of this and less of this. So that's probably cut it right about there. And then it comes to creating a custom frame. So luckily Joe has all this extra scrap wood. He can make a little frame for me. What you also can do is if you're not sure what size, if you're going to do some cropping and stuff like that, paint it on a heavy watercolor paper or mixed media paper, some type of paper product that you can basically cut down to whatever size. You can start larger, and then on that paper make marks 16 by 20, 11 by 14, 8 by 10, 5 by 7, depending on where you are there. Mark one size lower, like one standard size. So if you're painting 16 by 20, maybe mark it either 12 by 16, 12 by 19, 12 by 14, 12 by 16, and 11 by 14. That way you know exactly how far you can go to crop it. If you're painting 11 by 14, make a mark of 8 by 10. Just light mark, so you know that when you're painting, that if you're not sure if you want to go past that mark, then you know you can always trim it down. I hope that makes sense. But I'm pretty happy with this. So this is just a simple little landscape done with Crafters acrylic paint and dollar store brushes. So not bad. But the bristle brushes were the biggest challenge. But it turned out all right. So now what I'm going to do is do a similar painting using either it'll be the premium acrylics, maybe the traditions, and to actually see the difference. And I know there's going to be a difference, but what I'm going to be doing is before these videos are even posted, I'm going to be posting pictures for people to judge. By the time you're seeing this video, the contest will probably be over. And then the ones who judge the right choices, there'll be a contest for some prizes. So I know what the difference is going to be, but by the time you've seen this video, the contest will be done. So sorry. If you're on my email list, then you won't have to worry about missing anything. So go to artplace.ca to get on that list, because that's when I send out my announcements. Alrighty, so I'm going to clean up and go and prepare to do this painting now with the other paints. I'm going to change up the design a bit, the composition a little bit, so it's not the same carbon copy painting. And so I will see you in that video. And until then, stay inspired.